Hello, this is Susan Nash. I'm very happy to welcome you to week 10, Pivoting During the Pandemic. We're exploring new revenue sources as well as diversification strategies. And this week's theme is innovative digital imaging. We have a great group today, wonderful speakers. So I'm going to stop sharing so I can start introducing our panelists. So before I stop sharing, though, I'd like to recognize our sponsor, Unique Ventures. So thank you very much for sponsoring this series. Really very important and a wonderful gesture, and we appreciate the support. So I'd like to introduce you to Claudia Ruiz-Graham, ImagedReality, and Dror Ouzana of Pixtier, and Jeshurun Hembd, and Ananya Roy of EarthPeel, John Lorenz of Fracture Studies, and also I'd like to introduce you to Larry Davis, who is Professor of Economics at Texas A&M Texarkana. So Larry, would you like to say a few words?
So I'm pleased to be here tonight. Susan, I'm gonna have to log off and log back on. There's something distorted. I'm getting echo and.
I see you're logged on 2 places, so that's probably a good idea.
I'm sorry?
You're logged in 2 places somehow.
I couldn't even understand what you're saying. It's so distorted. So anyway, I'm gonna leave and try to get back in. So open the door when I knock.
Okay, I will.
All right. Bye.
Well, I can see what was going on. Somehow he's logged in twice. Don't know how that happens, but sometimes there are like interesting gremlins in Zoom. So basically, I'd like to start with our first presenter, Claudia Ruiz-Graham. But before we start, I just want to mention that we have 109 people who have signed up for tonight. It's a new record. It's very exciting. And also we have a new record for participation from different countries. We have Claudia, who's in England, nice and late there. But Dror Ouzana is in Israel. It's even nice, even later there. So thank you. And we have John Lorenz in New Mexico, and Jeshurun and Ananya, who are in Houston, and I'm in Oklahoma. So we have geographic diversity here. So thank you, and I'd like to turn over the floor to Claudia, and you can share your screen as well. So welcome.
Thank you very much, Susan, and thank you everybody for joining the call. I'm gonna start sharing the screen. Sec. And I hope, let me minimize this window here. So I hope you all can see my screen.
Yes, looks great.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you for joining. Yeah, and thank you so much for the invitation. My name is Claudia Ruiz-Graham. I'm the founder of ImagedReality. I'm a geologist by background, an oil explorer. My career, I spent most of my career with BP, over 23 years of industry experience. And I left BP as an exploration manager in 2016 to start my company, ImagedReality. So we focus, we are a startup in virtual reality with applications to geoscience. And today I'm gonna tell you a little bit about this technology, and also I'm gonna take you through some virtual field trips. So let's get started. So you will have seen these diagrams a lot of times. The diagram on the left is the oil price curve, and it's showing the different oil downturns that I have experienced since I started my career in the late 90s. And you know, usually what happens, as we know, after every downturn, there is a series of cost reductions and layoff. and this is followed by a loss of expertise and you know, senior expertise leave the companies, and without having enough time to transfer the knowledge to the younger generations. And then this is followed by a need to rebuild capability once this cycle starts again. The image on the right-hand side shows the shift in the UK offshore workforce from 2014 to 2018. Here at the base, you see the profile based in age, and in the axis, in the vertical axis, you see the number of people. The line in orange is showing the profile of the workforce, of the UK offshore workforce in 2014, and the solid block, the shape in 2018. And you see the dramatic change after the downturn of 2016. There was a lot of loss of capability on the more experienced staff, and also in the younger staff. And today, post-COVID-19, you know, this adds a new dimension in that there is a need to rebuild this capability. There will be the need to rebuild this capability, and this will need to be done mostly remotely and sustainably. So when I decided to start my company, you know, 2016, we had stopped sending people to the field in the industry in general. And as I'm sure you all agree with me, you know, the more rocks we see, the better we become at our jobs. And here we see an example of a fracture zone in the Jurassic Coast in England. That's the view from the beach, but when we take a drone image from above, the picture changes. That's the same fracture zone, and you can see the fracture, the fault coming through here. But actually, with this, what this beautiful image is showing us is this huge anticline that is plunging into this direction. So this bird's eye view gives us additional insights. So we decided to put together drone technology with virtual reality to bring the field to the office. I'm going to show you a short video just to show you how the user experiences virtual reality. This is an outcrop from the Jurassic Coast as well, and you can see the user can experience the outcrop at real scale, can interpret directly on it, and can bring different data sets, such as seismic images, wells, can collaborate remotely with others. And basically the user is surrounded by data. This is an example of a core from Brazil, from the pre-salt of Brazil. And you can, you know, visualize it, and rather than going to the cold store, you can bring it digitally. And in virtual reality, you can also visit facilities and in bringing different types of data sets. So our platform, 3D Gaia, has three main components. The VR application that has a series of analytical tools, access to data, and then this is supported by our cloud with a secure encrypted system that enables you to collaborate remotely with others. As a user, you know, you can create and deliver training and remote working sessions using real-time remote collaboration. You can integrate different data sets to create your training sessions. A key thing for me was to be, when designing this, was to be able to integrate data from the basin scale to the pore scale. So you are able to visualize satellite imagery. So here we're gonna go to the Zagros Mountains as an example in Iran. That it has some beautiful geology. What we are seeing here is, you know, it's a fault belt, and in the fault belt, we are seeing salt plugs. This is being outlined now in the pink color. It's a beautiful salt plug structure of about 14 kilometers length. And now, just in a different view, you are seeing the viewpoint of the person using this in virtual reality. So, you know, these technologies could be used as well for, you know, planning well sites, et cetera, et cetera. Let me now move on to the next example. Just expanding on remote collaboration. In this example, we have two users, one user located in France and the other one located in the UK, represented by avatars. And while one user is interpreting one of the layers, the other user sees that interpretation in real time. And there is basically a lot of interaction in a virtual reality session. And again, the people are surrounded by the data. So far, in our trials, we have connected teams in about 11 cities, 8 countries with up to 4 cities connecting, teams in 4 cities connecting simultaneously. But let's go now on a little field trip to deep water outcrops in County Clare in Ireland. Let's talk a little bit about geology. So we're going to start in this part of Ireland. We're going to go into this outcrop first of Torquil, and you will see the location is this little peninsula. It's basically a succession of submarine fans interbedded with embedded turbidites. I'm just going to stop this video here for a moment. And as you can see, this beautiful fan that is here is just wedging out. And you see let's say the unlapping of the embedded turbidites on top. This continues on the opposite side. In a moment, you will see another wedge, another fan appearing there. And we are right at the base of the cliff here in this example. The whole cliff here, it has about 30 meters. And now we're going to go into a 360 image, so you are able to appreciate the context of that, of where that cliff is. I'm just going to stop here for a moment. The model that we just saw is this cliff face, and we were looking at those fans at the base of the cliff. In real life, it's impossible to get that viewpoint. So virtual reality enables safe access to hazardous areas, and it gives you additional viewpoints, additional insights. The next station is called Fisherman Point. We are now seeing a series of folded fans and a channel complex. Sorry, my phone just started here. So now we're looking at a sand volcano that is on top of a mass transport complex. And now on the upper part of the sequence, we are seeing a channel complex. And you can see here it's a beautiful, beautiful sequence. And we're going to go now inside a 360 image, a 360 photosphere, and you are able to see the channel complex that is at the top of the sequence. It's another beautiful example. We're moving to another outcrop here. We are seeing now the continuation of the submarine fans, and these show lateral continuous reservoirs. And now we see this at real scale of the offshore. The next station is in Rheinwelle, opposite side of the peninsula. And what we see here is the sequence of lobes that is quite continuous. And on top of that, I'm going to show you in a moment, the channel complex that is cutting down the sequence. Let me just play that. As you can see, the line green shows the channel cut of the base of the channel complex that is cutting into the lobes. It's a very beautiful example, and you can bring in field photographs that show in more detail the stratigraphy. This is a view of the channel, and now we're of the channel base of the channel complex, and now we are in the 360 image, and you are able to appreciate the base of the channel complex here. Here you see the person for scale in there. The last examples of this series of the water outcrops shows a series, you will see the mass transport complex overlain by continuous submarine fans. You can also rotate, and you see the fractures on top of these submarine fans. Let's continue to the next example. Now we're going to move into a fluvial example of Triassic sandstones. Again, these are from the Wessex Basin. And we're going to start at the base of the cliff. We're here teleporting, and we're going to see now we're at the base of this cliff, seeing this at real scale and flying up the cliff. We are seeing a series of conglomerates of the alluvial plain, and now we're moving up the sequence and seeing these faces that are show subparallel stratification. These are braided sandstones. On the top of the sequence, you see the cross-bedding stratification. This is basically showing the whole sequence. So it starts with the alluvial sequence, goes into braided sandstones, and then into cross-bedded stratifications. You can bring in stratigraphic columns and correlate that directly with the outcrop. Now, I would like to show you an example of a pilot we did with Shell. This was a virtual field trip to unconventional outcrops of the Eagle Ford in Texas. They had a series of outcrops they acquired with LiDAR data, and then integrated with logs and with cores from the same outcrop. I'm going to play this. And I hope you can hear what they have to say. You're seeing. Sorry, are you hearing? Are you hearing the? Let me see if you can hear the sound.
No, we're not hearing the audio.
Yeah, we are not hearing the audio of recording. Yeah.
You might just summarize what they said.
Yeah, so basically it's it was a field trip that was run virtually after they went to the field trip, and they had they see it as a great integration tool for learning and development. I might have the summary of this in a moment. And in an integration with the engineers and geologists on the same like Talal is one of the reservoir engineers who actually appreciated the integration with the subsurface. Obviously, we realize not everybody has a VR headset right now, and a lot of people are working from home. So we have developed a new feature that enables the user to broadcast from within the app and broadcast via Zoom or via Teams, etc., etc. And we have added as well a plugin to download models from Sketchfab. So maybe before I go into this,
Looks like we have a broken link here.
The testimonials. These are I had my backup slides just in case. Sorry, are you seeing the? Sorry, are you? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Yes, we
so,
see.
So in terms of the testimonials from Shell, they see it as a great learning tool, a great way to collaborate and to integrate multidisciplinary teams. In terms of the instructor, and as an advantage to teach in this environment, the fact that you are surrounded by the data and that you are able to integrate different scales of data in the same environment. So in terms of what we see as the benefits of virtual reality, You know, I'm a geologist that loves going to the field. But what I have seen about virtual reality is that enables me to do things I cannot do in real life, such as jumping off a cliff, for example, and getting additional insights. But also the fact that you are surrounded by the data, that you are in an immersive space, you know, this increases cognition and retention, and you get to insights faster. The fact that you have real-time remote collaboration, that you can point to people directly to the concepts, it increases this generation of ideas. You get safe access to hazardous areas, and I think another fantastic application is that you get a wider outreach of training. Rather than just having a handful of people attending the field, you can, you know, you can repeat the field trip, but also you can share with more people within the organization. Of course, it helps with cost reduction, and it enables an immersive multidisciplinary team integration. Thank you very much. I would like to stop here and just open to any questions.
Why don't we hold the questions until the end? And also, if people would like to type questions in question and answer in the Q&A, then Claudia can answer them directly on the screen. So thank you, Claudia. This is wonderful.
Thank you.
I just love the clarity and the precision of the images. So I'm happy to introduce our next speaker, Dror Ouzana, who's from Pixtier. And he's coming to us now from Israel. So welcome.
Hi, well, thank you.
Feel free to share your screen.
Okay, I'm trying.
While you're opening the screen, I just wanted to thank you again, Claudia, for meeting with us in the middle of the night in London. It's very, very late, or in England.
No, it's a pleasure to be here. And that's why I show a bright picture on the back.
Yeah, thanks, Claudia.
Thank you.
Okay, you can see my screen.
Yes.
Great. So, hi, I hope you feel well today. My name is Dror. I'm co-founder and CEO of Pixtier. Pixtier was founded by my friend Yovav and myself. We're both Israeli mapping experts. We worked together for the last 20 years. And we started our way in 3D mapping with homeland security projects, mainly borders and critical infrastructures. But after numerous mapping projects, we decided we want to solve the problem of large-scale 3D mapping. So our market is the energy market, and our goal is to help energy companies having vast infrastructures to cut costs and to be more efficient through innovation. So our customer need to maintain and manage hundreds of thousands of assets and kilometers of lines or pipes. So for example, one of our customers called Enel, it's an electric utility, they need to manage 500,000 stations in Italy alone with cable that goes 4 times from Earth to the moon. So it's really, really huge infrastructure, and it's a complicated task to be able to map the entire infrastructure. So I think it's not an easy time now for the energy market, and most of them, from our perspective, there was some way back in terms of innovation systems or in the ability to leverage data collection for better field management and operation. So our solution is decreasing the expenditure and mainly the dependencies on third parties for data collection, for analytics. And we've proven to cut costs in field operation. It is estimated that 70% of the operation budget is maintenance. And this is where we put our main force. So the main problem that there is no digital replica of the entire grid assets. These companies, they have systems, different systems like CAD or BIM or GIS, but there is no single coherent platform and no much of 3D view. Data is spread between systems. A lot of time it's missing or invalid or not updated, or it's in the possession of a third-party contractor. So without all this, it's quite hard to get meaningful insights. So the solution, our product GeoTwin, we developed a web-based cloud platform, which basically has the entire globe for a first view, and the user can add his own data. And each data is fused into the system along with the old data and creating an updated view. And the process of data collection is super simple, and it doesn't need any professional employees. It's just pressing a few buttons, and processing is done within minutes because it's on the cloud. So some call this process digitization or digital twin. There's many words for terms for this approach, but basically it is the need to have a true-to-life replica of the physical asset that you manage. So I'm going to show you a short video demonstrating the product.
GeoTwin, a 3D mapping and repository platform, helps companies manage their physical assets efficiently. Connecting with off-the-shelf devices, it automates the process of fusing data from various sources into one consistent 3D map, shortening the way to a full digitized replica of the physical world. This map can be augmented with enterprise data such as GIS layers, 360 degrees images, IoT devices, CAD plans, technical sheets, and maintenance history. It helps plan maintenance operation and safety procedures before leaving the office. Compare existing infrastructure to original plans, create inventory lists, and prepare for catastrophic events. Instead of using multiple platforms from various vendors, GeoTwin gives a single view of the entire data, secured and accessible everywhere from the web, giving way for meaningful data collection and sharing between colleagues.
Okay, so this was the GeoTwin, and within GeoTwin, the user can analyze. It's basically all 3D geolocation models, and the user can analyze the geometry aspect with millimeters of accuracy. You can understand the spatial correlation. You can view images or video taken at the site, add, receive annotations. And recently we added some AI features to locate potential hazards. For example, when a tree or some other kinds of vegetation will hit electricity light and needs to be trimmed. So all this process is automated. And we basically packed 20 years of experience in the technology for algorithms for processing 3D, and to make it super easy to collect data to create this digital twin. So we support a variety of mapping platform, and it can be stationary, can be mobile, can use drones from ground, lidars, radars, cameras, or even from the air. So some snapshots from the product. So here you can see how we add GIS layers, in this case buildings. If I click a building, I'm going to get the data if it exists of the building. You can see here there's 20 million points in this view. It's not a picture, it's a point cloud. So we did a lot of optimization to allow the user a good experience, because it's all web and it is streamed to his device. And we're able to do so, though there are a lot of points. The user can change the base map. We've embedded some of our own, but if the company has a repository of their own images and orthophotos, they can use it as well. This is another example. We implemented Bing and OSM and Mapbox. Each user can take a 2D image and just insert it to the database. If the image has a geolocation, it will be inserted into the correct point, and there's actually now a fusion between the 2D and the 3D in the same view. Classified data, in this case coming from a helicopter. So we can get almost any kind of data into the system. We're now implementing IoT layer in the system. So we fuse everything into one environment. We also enable AR and VR to view the system. And as far as we can see, we see that there is a need to view everything in 3D. So we aim to solve the problem that takes a lot of time and money to be able to map huge amount of data. And the companies, they don't have the data. They are actually missing data for their existing infrastructure assets. They don't have yet a digital replica. Some are forced by regulation today to build such a digital twin or mapping environment. And we see they're actively seeking for innovation. And also COVID-19 will emphasize remote operation needs as we see it. So this is us. Our technology has been tested and validated by several big organizations, proved to be efficient in cutting costs and providing value for Enel, which is the second largest electric utility in the world. This is our vision. So GeoTwin is unique for its fusion capabilities, its rich 3D environment. The business model is such that the customers pay for processing and storage. It contains vast amount of data and analytic capabilities. And we are currently actively seeking for a new customer and also investors. So feel free to contact me for any question. Thank you very much.
Well, that's great. So basically, say if somebody is in a different country or in the US and they would like to kind of fast track their business ideas and partner with you, you're open?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Great.
Yeah, I'd be happy to hear.
Excellent. Okay. Well, we'll save the questions till the end, but in the meantime, please direct your questions to Dror in the Q&A section or also in chat. So that's really great. So I'd like to invite Ananya and Jeshurun to share their screens, or I don't think you can simultaneously share screens. So one of you can share the screens, you can both talk, and that'll be great. So it's a great segue because here we have a different kind of digital twins for different
yes.
focus. So welcome.
So hello, I'm Jeshurun, and I'm here with Ananya. And we are building EarthPeel, which is a digital twin of the Earth. But we're building one that you can peel and slice and try to look inside at the subsurface. But today we mainly just want to talk to you about the big picture of working from home, because like many of you, we've been working at home for the last few months. And I think the experience is different depending on your career. I have a friend that's working at a company that does corporate taxes, and he thinks that working from home is just fine. But for us geoscientists, not so much. We like to go out to the field and look at the rocks. So that's the question, can you do this from home? Next slide, please. Yeah. So this is what we like to do. We fly to some exotic location. In this case, it's Portugal. We go to some beautiful site. Maybe you go for a swim first, and then you go out and take a look at the rocks. And of course, we always book an extra day so we can see the country. I think Portugal, you can do a great wine tasting tour. Then you get back on the plane and come back to the office next week. And then at the office, we meet up with our friends and look through our data and our photos, and we start to tell the whole story. Where we went, what we did, all the samples we tested. Oh wait, that's the wrong picture, I think. Oh, good timing, there's the boss. As I was saying, so you look through the data and you tell the whole story. When those layers were deposited, how they got folded, the timing of this unconformity, and so on. But again, both of these parts, the field trip and then the discussions back at the office, they're really hard to do from home. But we have to face it, it could be a while before our companies start approving flights again. So is there any way we can replicate that experience now? And we think that some of this can be done from home with web-based tools. So Ananya will be explaining how this could work and then show you also some examples that you can try yourself. We'll send you the links to see what it would be like. And then at the end, we'll just briefly talk about how these can be put together so we can start to enjoy our job a little more again and do our field work from home with digital twins.
Right, so this digital twin is really a key tool. And this is basically what we saw in the previous talk with GeoTwin. Digital twin is a digital replica of a physical facility, but one that you can study and interact with remotely. So for example, production engineers use digital replicas of their platform, and it has all the parts and features of the actual platform, but they can interact with it from their screen. But now instead of a digital twin of a platform or facility, just imagine a digital twin of planet Earth. And Google Earth is a good start, You can spin it around and zoom anywhere for a bird's eye view. But what do geoscientists like us really want to be able to do with a digital twin? So we want to be able to marvel at outcrops, get really close, look at the structures of the rocks. We love geological maps, and we want to go way deeper than the surface. We want to see what's underneath at the rocks all the way down to the moho. So Google Earth doesn't really scratch the surface. Now, while we don't have a full digital twin of the Earth yet, there are some tools out there that let us do some of these things from home. So let's look at a few. So one example is we can go on a virtual field trip like this one in Shenandoah Valley of Virginia by Professor Callan Bentley. It's like a guided field trip with zoomable pictures of rocks at all the different stops and engaging videos explaining geology by Callan Bentley himself. And this is a very specific field trip with very specific stops, but with a true digital twin of the Earth, you could choose your own stops, you can make your own field trip. Here's another example that lets you visit virtual outcrops in 3D. This UK website has a few outcrops on an interactive map. And you can zoom on the map and click to see a thumbnail image of the rock, and click on the thumbnail to open a really cool 3D model of the outcrop. And you can pan and zoom and even tilt the view. Now, this might not look as fancy as a full-featured proprietary product like 3D Gaia, but it is free. So go ahead to the link and try it out yourself and see what it's possible to do. What else do we like to do on field trips? Well, we like to collect samples of rocks. And here's an example. NOAA maintains a repository of hundreds of thousands of marine core samples. And you can click on any of these core samples on an interactive map, and it takes a few clicks, but it takes you to the actual photographs of the cores, which are very cool and really fun to see. So you can basically do your field trip, look at outcrops, look at some core samples, but when you're back from your field trip and you've done all of this, you want to interpret the data you collected together with your colleagues and build a whole geological story. So can that be done from home? Well, here's one example of that. Recently, Osoki, that's a UK-based company, they had this virtual event where they invited geoscientists from all over the world to interpret the same 2D line of seismic data from the North Sea. And dozens of geoscientists did this using Osoki's collaboration tool. And at the end of the event, Osoki generated this heat map of all the interpretations. So you can see which interpretations, which picks were the obvious ones, but you can also see which were the less obvious but also interesting picks that were generated in this interpretation event. Now imagine instead of interpreting a single line, you can interpret a volume, and then you turn this volume into this interpreted volume into maps. And when you take this map and you stitch it together with maps in the neighborhood, you can start to build a geological understanding of the whole area. And here's one example of that. The MacroStrat project at the University of Wisconsin has stitched together many local geological maps to create one seamless map of the near surface geology for the whole world. Now, most of the examples you've seen so far are like digital twins, but only of some specific locations of the Earth. But when you have a true digital twin, you have a full globe, then you can start doing really cool things like traveling back in time to really help tell your geological story. Now, this is an example from Professor Christopher Scotty's, and it lets you move a time slider back in time and look at the paleography in the Jurassic or Cretaceous period, or whichever time period you're interested in. So what we're seeing is with a digital twin, you could really begin to replicate this whole experience of a field trip, from going and doing the actual field work, looking at rocks, collecting samples, all the way to coming back and interpreting the data and building your whole geological story.
So we'll send you the links to all these examples and encourage you to try them yourself. They're all web-based tools interacting with data in the cloud. And we think you'll find that it's surprisingly enjoyable. They're fast and easy to learn. And so I think the next thing we should be asking ourselves is why isn't most oil company software this easy? And also, how would my work improve if I had tools like this? And then we can be asking our boss, when will we have a digital twin of the Earth that we can peel apart and look inside? We've had Google Earth now for almost 20 years. It's time to start slicing it.
Here's the top search result.
But so far, all we've shown is pieces here and there. All of the data that we've shown is in different places and in different formats. And of course, it doesn't really work well with your company's internal data. So here at EarthPeel, what we're envisioning is being able to do everything on one globe. We're integrating all kinds of data, both this open data and your company's internal data, so that you'll be able to type in one search box and find whatever you need. And of course, having it all on one globe will let you enjoy a seamless field trip back into geologic time, even when you're stuck working from home. So let us know what you think. What would you like to see in a digital twin of the Earth? And we'll be happy to talk to you about how to make your work from home experience a little more enjoyable. Thank you.
Thank you. Both of you did a wonderful job passing the baton back and forth. That was a really good presentation. And I'm really amazed at how well these presentations are all blending together. They're great. And so we've looked at big picture, and I love the idea of going back in time with it and thinking about being in the Jurassic or being an algal stromatolite. Anyway, so at any rate, a wonderful job. And please address questions to Jeshurun and Ananya in the question and answer or in chat. And we'll move to John Lorenz. I'd like to welcome him to present. And he will be looking at a close-up, won't be the big picture.
Yes, Susan. Hi. Thank you very much. Yeah, we'll sort of take the other end of the spectrum here and go to some rather small operations, looking specifically at 4-inch diameter cores. And am I sharing here properly, Susan?
Not yet. So let me make sure that you're a host. You are. You just put the share screen, click on the green, and then find the screen you want to share.
Yeah, I thought I did that. Stand by. Okay, share screen.
Okay. Here we go.
Okay, there we go. Thank you.
Excellent.
Right, okay, so I'll be talking about CT scans today, and they're, we're looking at relatively small samples of a reservoir, i.e. core, 4 inches, 10 centimeters in diameter, and any length you care to make them. But there's such a minuscule amount of the reservoir, such a small sampling of the reservoir, that you really need to make the most of what you got. We don't sell CT scans. We use CT scans when we do fracture studies. We're consultants, Scott Cooper and I. So this is just sort of a presentation showing what one of the tools is that we use for looking at cores. And I'd like to talk about, some of the positive aspects, some of the negative aspects, and some of the gotchas, some of the pitfalls or traps that you can run into if you're not careful when you use these things. And of course, CT scan stands for computed tomography, and it's a medical technology. It comes from this field of medicine. And it's basically a three-dimensional X-ray view of your core. And the nice thing is that you make it before, you make these images before the core comes out of the barrel. And some of the advantages are, no muss, no fuss. You don't have to get your hands muddy dealing with the core. And that's a double-edged sword. We'll talk about that in a minute here. But a real advantage is it gives you a permanent digital record of the core. You know, before you start slabbing it, before you start sampling it, before you start plugging it, it gives you a permanent record of what this core looked like. It's non-destructive, so it's a real plus there. It can pick up some lithology changes that you wouldn't always see unless you slab the core. So some of the early samplings that you can use are dependent on the CT scans. It's not cheap. It's an expensive technology, but if you're needing the maximum amount of data from the core, it's a good thing to have. And one of the advantages, especially if you've got a highly fragmented core, is that you can see how it all fit together before it came out of the core. You can see that if you actually started pulling this stuff out of the core, out of the core barrel, the inner barrel there, it starts falling apart on you. Really, the only thing that's holding it together is all this white glue, which is the drilling mud. And the minute you pull it apart there, especially if you try to slab it, you got a real problem, and it winds up looking like this. You know, this is a core that is beautifully fractured, but you have a hard time putting it into context because it's all disarticulated and pulled apart there. Well, if they had had a digital image CT scan before they pulled it out, they'd have a much better chance of pulling it back together. It's also a three-dimensional view, which you can't get from just looking at the surface of a core. So here you have a fracture coming down the surface of the core, and if you look at that piece of core and find that if you look at it end on, there are 4 such fractures. Each of these little triangles here is a surface expression of a fracture. How are you going to connect those fractures, right? There's 3 different possibilities. They, may be parallel in one direction, they may be parallel in another direction, or may be intersecting. Those are the same 4 fracture traces on the surface connected in 3 different ways. Well, if you have a CT scan, you can figure that out because you've got a full 3-dimensional view of the core. Here you've got crossing fractures, here you've got parallel fractures. Each one of those had 4 surface expressions on the core, and unless you broke the core, something your client company doesn't always want you to do, you'd have a hard time deciding just how to connect those fractures and whether you had 1 set of parallel fractures or 2 sets of intersecting fractures. In addition, because it's non-destructive, you can look at features like this and say, wow, that's really impressive there. I wonder what happens in the 3rd dimension. And here it is in the 3rd dimension. That's just a little set of very small, very minuscule, non-effective fractures. Those fractures are very prominent in one orientation, but not in another. So, the CT scan allows you to see what's going on within the core. There's disadvantages, all right? Here's 2 fractures over here on the side here, and you'd like to know whether those are natural fractures that are going to affect the permeability in your reservoir, or whether one or both of them maybe are induced fractures. Well, if you got mineralization, one of them at least, this one up here is probably a natural fracture, but you got to be careful. That's sort of a white trace there. That just indicates a contrast in whatever material is there. And if it's a contrasting mineralization, all well and good. But look at the contrast you get with the drilling mud around the edges of the core there. It's entirely possible for some of that contrasting white material there to be drilling mud that's seeped into an induced fracture. You can tell relative orientations, but you got to be very careful about that. And as I mentioned before, no muss, no fuss. If you don't get your hands dirty looking at the core and take and compare the core with the CT scans, you can have a real misunderstanding, a miscorrelation on your hands there, and you can make entirely erroneous interpretations. The one thing that the CT scan does not get is the surface characterization of a fracture, which turns out to be fairly important. Here's an example. We've got an inclined fracture coming down here, and it's possible that it is one of a set of intersecting conjugate shear fractures. And that's great. That's what you'd really like to see in your reservoir, because that gives you intersecting connectivity within the reservoir. It's also possible that what you've got is a set of parallel extension fractures. And without the surface features, such as the steps here, such as the little lineations on there that tell you that this is in fact a shear fracture, you could make the wrong interpretation. And that has big implications for how you reconstruct the permeability system in your reservoir. A lot of people have made the mistake of making the interpretation that a set of horizontal fractures, especially in shale cores, are natural horizontal fractures. And they look at these and say, wow, these are really great. We've got a perfect fracture permeability system in these cores. And if you look at the core itself over here, you can see that there's a rim on the outer edge of each of these little discs, each of these little pucks. And that tells you these fractures are forming after the fact. They formed after the core had been cut. So you got to be a little careful about your interpretation. Yes, there are horizontal fractures and they do occur in core, but you'd be a fool to make an interpretation based entirely on the geometry of the core. You really, if you've got the core, make the effort to look at the core, correlate it, because these CT scans give you a wonderful three-dimensional view. They give you an added dimension to your interpretation, but they've got to be quality checked. They've got to be ground truth. Here's another example. Here's a beautiful set of induced pedal fractures. These are created by the drill bit in the core, and they give you a beautiful stress reference so that you can orient your cores, you orient your natural fractures relative to the in situ stresses. You look at that in the CT scans, and you see the same type of patterns there. Remember, these are unrolled surfaces of the scan, just like an image log. And this may or may not be another pedal fracture, just like this non-mineralized one, or maybe that's mineralization, or maybe it's drilling mud. You don't know until you've looked at it. You can be fooled. Here's an example of a very highly effective fracture with a very subtle signature in the CT log because there's no contrast. There's no material contrast between the rock and the absence of rock, which is the void space along the fracture aperture here. If you look at the core itself, this is what the fracture looks like. It's an unmineralized natural fracture. It is permeable. It shows permeability just because the drilling mud's invading along that fracture. But it'd be real easy to overlook a fracture like that. Whereas in contrast, this fracture here has a booming fracture signature. And you look at that and say, wow, I've got a beautiful fracture. It's giving me great permeability. But if you look at it in the core, that fracture is completely occluded by gypsum. And the contrast between the limestone and the gypsum gives this great big bright fracture signature there that makes for a possible misinterpretation that this is an important fracture. It's not. It's not an effective fracture. It has little, if any, permeability effect on your reservoir. There's a couple of things that you need to be aware of, these pitfalls and traps that you need to look at. Scott was looking at one of our cores for a client and realized that the orientation references that he was finding didn't make any sense. And it turns out the cross sections that you see, this type of cross section right here, are presented looking uphole, not downhole the way a geologist would look at them, but uphole the way a doctor would look at them. So it makes a difference. If you've got a reference here and you're looking uphole, your fracture here is 40 degrees clockwise from the reference line, whereas if you're looking downhole, you could misinterpret that as your natural fracture being 40 degrees counterclockwise relative to that reference line. So you got to be careful of that. In addition, the CT scans give you see over here, there's a 0, 45, 90. Okay, I've blown that up a little bit here so that you can see 0, 90 degrees, 180 degrees. And it's real temptation to think of those as north, east, south, and west, because that's the way they're presented, with north towards the top of the page, 0 degrees towards the top of the page, 90 degrees off to the right, corresponding to east, but those are not north, east, south, and west. As a matter of fact, remember, we're looking uphole, so that would make these backwards. If this was truly north, off to the right would be west. What they are is a relative orientation for your core for that continuous interval of core. So you cannot, even though these pieces of core, these two images are from the same 3-foot core, they are from different 3-foot segments of the core. And each 3-foot segment gets CT scanned separately. And there may even be discontinuities within each 3-foot interval. So you got to be a little careful. The strikes here are irrelevant because you cannot lock this piece of core to this piece of core, and 0 is not north. So they give you a relative strike. Here, yeah, great. We're looking at a fracture here, that's the cross section. We're looking at another fracture here, that's the cross section. We can say, because this is a continuous piece of core, that these two fractures intersect at about an 80-degree angle, but we can't say anything about whether they strike relative north, east, south, or west. We only have relative orientations, and those relative orientations are only good for the contiguous 3-foot segments that are not dissociated. So just to summarize, CT scans are important. They can be very powerful, but they can also be misleading if you don't know what it is you're looking at. They can add significantly, but they don't replace a hands-on look at the core study. Yeah, no muss, no fuss, but if you're not getting dirty, you're not doing your job. They offer a permanent digital record. They give you internal 3D geometries that are non-destructive. They can show relative angles as long as you're in contiguous pieces of core, but they don't show surface textures, and you've got to remember that the view that you have is upwhole. And if you want further reading, Scott and I have wrote a couple of brand new books. You all need a copy. Thank you very much.
That was great. And I agree, everybody needs a copy. AAPG publications, of course.
Right.
They're wonderful. Well, thank you. That was really great. And I would like to read some of the questions from the question and answer, the chat. In the meantime, while we're doing that, I'd like everybody to go into the chat and just say, like, maybe type in where you're from. So, and also I want to answer the question, will this session be available to be seen later? Yes, just to re-emphasize, the goal of this series is to give people ideas and to begin to formulate applicable and implementable ideas. So that means that we're sharing these, I'm recording all of these, and then I will make them available. You'll get an email with links to the recording. So yes. And eventually, we're going to have 20 in total, and eventually we'll be putting together kind of a site for each recording, and that will have a lot more information. So, okay. So where are people from? Wyoming, Houston, Miami, Minnesota. Excellent. Conroe, London, Provo. Nice. Houston. So I know that we had someone from Benin. I think he might have gotten a little bit sleepy, so a little late. And we had people from Spain. We had, so that's great. Okay, so let me go into the chat. So Emily Britton asks, do you just run CT scans on the core, or do you also use gamma to correlate the data? I think that would be for you, John. You're muted.
Yeah, John is muted, yeah. He's
Yeah,
talking.
Go talking long and loud, and all I hear is myself. Yeah, we use everything that we get. We use gamma rays, we use CT scans, we use correlate to the image logs. If we've got any kind of seismic, we try to do that. The type of work, the type of study we do, we try to bring in every little piece of data, trying to expand from the small sampling of the reservoir to the full 3D fracture system. Try to understand how it affects the permeability in the reservoir. The fracture intensity will give you a measure of the stress system at the time of fracturing. That may have been 40 million years, 80 million years ago. The fracture intensity today does not necessarily relate directly to the present day state of stress. Now, there are several different kinds of induced fractures, pedal fractures and centerline fractures, that will tell you fracture in situ stress orientation for the present day, but not necessarily stress magnitude.
Oh, that's great. And then Patrick Ing asks, is the fracture a measure of stress?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just sort of lap right into that one there, having read it. But yeah, not a measure of present day stress, but of the stress at the time of fracturing.
Excellent. Great. Well, if anybody wants to open up their microphone and ask a question with their voice, go ahead and do so.
Yeah, I really liked the EarthPeel. The first time I'm hearing about it, so maybe I don't know how I missed it. I spent so much time on the computer. Totally. Yeah, I like that. I don't know. I'm still trying to understand what the business model is, and everything is open, and how I can use it. I find a lot of uses for it, definitely, but I'm trying to, I'm opening up a website. So is it the state of development of website, that's it? Or do you have any plans to do something, beef up this website?
Our current website, I'm sorry, is pretty far behind. So as for the business model, we do like to support all the open data that's available and keep that as open as possible. But our key product is a software that lets you integrate your internal data, which of course is not open, to integrate all of that onto the same platform, onto one globe. So we're currently, yes?
And what's the name of the platform? EarthPeel?
EarthPeel, yes.
That's a one platform. So you could put together satellite imagery, core data, exposures, reports, and videos. Somebody's video, audio, lectures.
Yes, yes.
That's pretty cool.
So thank you. That's a great question. So I have a question for Dror. So Dror, so in the facilities inspections, et cetera, that you're able to do, how easily can you integrate this into, say, AI that does like predictive maintenance?
Yeah, well, quite easily, because when you talk about a lot of data, there are actually it's like food for the algorithm. So when you have a lot of data, it's easy to find anomalies. We did a project in Brazil lately, in which we identified the connector on top of the pole by using AI with the images, so they will know that there are actually two types of connectors, so they can differentiate between both of them. I think it was 98% automatic.
Oh, that's really good. Yeah, I definitely want to follow up with you on this. I have some ideas, these potential connections. So Claudia, I have a question for you. So I really like the point that you made that this is a fantastic tool for being able to look at outcrops that are in reality too dangerous to visit. And I keep thinking of people who keep falling off in the Grand Canyon to their, bad.
Yeah, that's happened. Actually happened while marathon. We went to Majorca Islands, Carbonate, the two trip. The trip before we went, in fact, one of the members of Marathon Oil, she fell back. She broke her broke her leg, actually. Yeah, then the following, she kind of advised me what not to do when you go there.
Thanks, Sharma. That's a good point. Well, so Claudia, so I was just wondering, can you think of a few specific outcrops that have amazing analogs in the subsurface that are sort of the gold standard and must analyze for most petroleum geologists?
Oh, definitely, there are quite few, like the outcrops in the Book Cliff. That are fantastic. Deep water turbidite in California, in San Diego. The deep water turbidite that I show from County Clare in Ireland, and similar outcrops in South Africa. So actually, the great thing of virtual reality is that will enable you to put together field trips with analogs from different parts of the world and just jump into those sessions, which is fantastic to compare different architectures.
And so, yeah, I noticed that you were using like the seismic stratigraphy, and so you basically get a sense of more of a reality check and analogs that are based on reality, which I think is a really, really good point in a time where AI and machine learning just picks up patterns. The patterns, the training set, in this case can be reality rather than just attractive anomaly.
Yeah, so it's using the reservoir models, the reservoir outcrop models, like analogs to your reservoirs in the subsurface, and see in more detail than what you actually get to see on seismic. But definitely for me as a geologist, this is a great door to enable more people to see more outcrops. I think we just don't do enough of that on our careers for different reasons.
So Claudia, I got a question. So I think you already answered the question, but one point is, say so you're the expert in putting it together and the platform, and you got a platform and everything, but a person who's a deep water expert, somebody, so that means he would use the already a stack of libraries that you already got, or maybe what if the library doesn't address the problem that we're talking about? And me being a geologist, I don't have such wealth of images, but mostly from books and references, not a field examples. So how would I go about generating those images that do I have to go physically to go take my pictures and put them in the platform, or how do I do it? I'm kind of trying to wrap in my head.
So, if you get access, there are examples like that were shown before from EROC, for example. There are universities who have acquired already quite a bit of data and are sharing those data. If you are an individual user, you can obtain the data with a drone. You basically just fly a drone, and using photogrammetry, you acquire the 3D model of that drone and of that outcrop using photogrammetry. And then what you do is import those 3D models into the platform. Okay. And put that together with other subsurface data to create your training session or your remote collaboration session.
Okay. That's great. Yeah, that's excellent. Well, Carmen? Oh, that's good. We need...
That's okay.
No, sorry. This is a really good conversation, but we have a special treat tonight, and I don't want to miss it. One of the goals of this series is to give people connections, ideas, so that they can start their own business ideas or concepts. And so we have Brandy Butler and Julia Lemaster who are here tonight, and they'd like to talk and show you what they've come up with, and then have the audience to sort of ask questions and give them some feedback. So Brandy and Julie, do you want to share?
Can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay. Hi. So I'm not sure if I'm able to share my screen or if you need to share it.
You should be able to share it. I made you a co-host.
Okay.
So you should see the green share screen button on the bottom.
So I'll let Julia do a little bit of background, how we kind of got started here, how we kicked this off, how we got hooked up with each other, and then we'll kind of get into our presentation and hopefully get some feedback from the group. Should we hit that? Which button? Okay, right.
We can see it looks good.
Thanks. So I'm Julia Lemaster. I have known Brandy for many years because she's been a member of my local geologic society and has come up. She's originally from Casper, and so we've gotten to know each other. And then she actually hired me a couple of years ago to work on some projects for a company she was with at the time. And we just started talking. We both found ourselves in similar positions professionally. And at about that time, Susan started this workshop series. So we've been with this workshop since the beginning, when there were, I think, 7 people on the first one.
Smaller group.
Yep, much smaller group. So this has really evolved. Susan's done a great job throughout this. So I will let Brandy start off. And so this idea really was helped along by this workshop series.
Yeah, our business plan is coming together through through working in this workshop and some continued networking in other groups, and the inspiration, you know, in listening to other people's stories and helping us, I guess, just keep motivated and keep moving forward. So I guess we'll kind of get into this. We are at a point where we are an official business now. We have an LLC, we have a website. We are starting to put together our marketing to present to clients in the Rocky Mountain region, which is where we intend to focus our efforts. So we are Windy Mountain Energy. We will be regulatory as well as geologic consultants, and focusing in the Rockies. I need to figure out how to hide this. Hang on one second, it's blocking my screen. We're formed to provide the regulatory and geologic support for projects in the Rocky Mountain region. Our backgrounds enabled us to understand and provide often overlooked critical links between technical data and other project needs, including that regulatory requirement component. We're geologists, communicators, and translators. So with my background working for multiple operators over the years, having gone through various phases of asset acquisition, asset divestiture, I've seen where things can often fall through the cracks and lead to problems moving forward with getting rid of assets, with purchasing assets. And Julia's got a strong background on the government regulatory side and consulting. And hopefully as we go through our next few slides, you'll see how this kind of can all pull together for us to do some consulting to help the companies that will be coming in proceed in a better way. So my background, I'm a 3rd generation Casper, Wyoming native, 3rd generation oil field. My grandfather and my father were both in the oil field before me. Currently I'm a licensed professional geologist. I've worked as a consultant as well as for multiple operators. I have a very broad skill set. I started in accounting, worked into geotechnical, finished school and became a geologist, and now am licensed. And over the course of all that, I've worked in multiple basins. I've worked on multiple projects for oil, for gas, tight oil, tight gas, coal bed methane, here in the US as well as internationally. So a lot of exposure to a lot of different types of projects.
So I've been up here in Wyoming for 15 years. I'm also a licensed geologist, and I actually started my career out working for the Wyoming Oil and Gas Commission, and my mentor there was Rick Marvel, who was the one that actually built that entire data website. And then I was recruited from there to a consulting firm that I was with for 10 years. I'm also very active in the different professional societies, past president of both the local society here and then the Rocky Mountain section of AAPG. For the past year, I've been the AAPG sections chair, helping out the VP of sections and the new VP of Sections is Linda Sternbach, who's the spouse of a former AAPG president. And she's very involved in the Houston Geological Society. And then I've gotten to know Susan Nash very well through both the AAPG sections work and also the New Rockies Members in Transition Committee. My experience has been both conventional and unconventional, mainly focusing on projects requiring any sort of interaction with regulatory bodies. I put together some very unique water flood projects. I've been involved in hundreds of spacing hearings, quite a few disposal wells, probably 30 to 40% of the disposal wells here in Wyoming in the past couple of years I've helped permit. So lots of exposure to both unconventional and conventional Rockies plays.
So we're trying to brainstorm what our skill sets are, and there's a lot we have done and a lot we want to do, but we've been trying to find better ways to summarize some of this. A lot of what we intend to provide is data collection, data transfer, data digitization, information reporting, and hopefully get involved in doing some reservoir assessments, reservoir modeling, and being licensed, we're both capable of doing any sort of licensed geologic reporting or expert witness testimony if it's required.
So one of the areas we're focusing on is dealing with water, either looking for source wells for industrial, domestic, agriculture, and then also injection and disposal wells, working with water floods. And then Wyoming has some very unique rules. They have EPA primacy on both Class 1 commercial and then Class 2 disposal wells. So knowing how to work through that, but we can also permit through the EPA program because it's essentially the same thing.
And then of course, we also want to keep our foot in the door with oil and gas all the way around, from the acquisition phase through divestiture phase and end of life cycle phase for the P&As. But regulatory is a component for every one of these phases as we're going through. And in the Rockies, we have a lot of unique geology as well as unique regulatory environments.
So we have a lot of federal minerals up here, so that adds a whole another layer of complexity that a lot of people don't have to experience elsewhere. So how did we get here? We're basically in the game of making lemons into lemonade. That's my personal life motto right now.
So like I said at the beginning, we've been participating in a lot of workshops and networking groups via the internet recently, and that's helped us come together. That's helped us formulate some game plan. And we kind of had some stumbling blocks along the way, of course. Some of our biggest challenges were figuring out how are we going to find money or cover ourselves for the expensive licensing of software. And a lot of the software can be critical to getting our jobs done. And how are we going to set up shop? Are we going to be virtual? Are we going to have an office? How do we come up with money if we're going to have an office? And through some unique networking and trade deals, we've been able to come up with software for ourselves as well as some potential office space. And going forward, we're working on, of course, our marketing, our elevator pitch, getting the word out, and we would really appreciate any feedback you guys can provide us.
Thank you.
That was great. Okay, so here's, I'd like to open up the floor and have people give suggestions. I'll get it started, it's been my perspective that right now, especially, that the people are looking at stopping hemorrhaging. So the key is to identify real and urgent pain points and possible fatal problems. So you might identify a few of those and put them first in your presentation or in your website.
I'm taking notes. Sorry. Thanks, Susan.
You're welcome.
Yes.
Any thoughts? Larry, Dr. Davis, is a professor of economics, and he specializes in strategic management. Larry, do you have any thoughts or suggestions? Or
No, each of the presentations were very interesting. Of course, they're in the technical areas, they're outside of my range, but in the strategic planning, there are certain steps to follow. And a lot of times that companies in critical situations want to short circuit and avoid some of the steps in the process, and that's often disastrous. So in the critical times now, when there's some significant challenges out there, I think it's good to have a good strategic planning model and follow that, and just make sure you're not shortcutting and missing some of the steps.
yeah, and you know, like one of the big issues right now is cost cutting, and you know, cost cutting can go too far in the case of resulting in spills or not filing permits or filing reports.
I think a lot of times what I've seen from the operator side is as they're having layoffs or they're shutting down, they're looking at a bankruptcy, a lot of the paperwork, especially with the regulatory agencies, just doesn't get done. It falls behind because the people that were doing it are no longer there. And the people that are left aren't even aware of what's happening until they're receiving notices and they're already in trouble. And it can get too late too quick.
Yeah.
And also, as far as cost savings, there's been a lot of layoffs. There's a lot of unemployed people, but the work process on a lot of these projects still has to move forward. And it may be more cost effective for them to temporarily bring people in as consultants to take care of those needs rather than maintaining people on staff.
That's a really good point.
That's an excellent point. I mean, sometimes when you have a key person who leaves for whatever reason, them there, and sometimes companies will just grab a warm body to put them in there, and they don't have the expertise, and it's just a downward spiral. And your suggestion to temporary use consultants is a good patch for short-term deficiency when somebody leaves.
Susan, can I make a couple of points?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Brandy, Julia, nice to meet you.
Hi, nice to meet you, Claudia.
So a couple of suggestions. One, there are some platforms out there that try to connect consultants with providers of services with people who need the services. So might be worth investigating those platforms out there. And the second one will be to try to maintain your costs very low. And like you were talking about potentially get an office and things like that. Nowadays everybody's working remotely. I have worked remotely from home for 3 years, and my team is located remotely, and we work really, really well like that. And that enables us to keep lean on costs and to be able to react to moments like the current moment like that. So I will advise you that. And the third one is to expand a lot on your networking. Use a lot of, I have found very useful LinkedIn, and be involved in LinkedIn either by posting or or by connecting with other people. That's always very helpful. And now there are a lot of conferences that are running virtually, that have networking events virtually, and there is always good opportunity to connect there. So.
Thank you. And yeah, we are very much trying to expand our networks and participate in networking events.
Those are some great examples, great ideas, Claudia.
Thank you.
Yeah, Rocky Mountain is it's a world of its own. A lot of people from South, they've got a pretty well resource base. In fact, when I did some work on Wyoming, that state government resources were much they're better laid out than Texas Railroad Commission. Actually, I got a lot of input from the local data. Very well maintained data locally. You're really well resourced there. That's what I think.
That's a really good point. Another thing too, you might take a look at oil and gas investor, or look at some of the financial news to see which companies are divesting of the properties and who's picking up their properties, the mergers and acquisitions.
I've just recently got some information from a friend in Texas where we can get hooked up on a newsletter that can alert us to bankruptcies that are being filed and some other things too.
That's good. And the reason that I was mentioning that properties will need to do due diligence.
You froze.
Yeah, we're frozen here.
It's froze. Uh-oh.
You can have a tab for consultants there who can provide help.
Okay, so it says my internet connection is unstable. Okay, so
you're back.
And it was. Usually this has been good. This is the first time this has happened, and in this, knock on wood, in this series. Any rate, just wanted to say that in compliance, helping people with compliance issues. So anyway, it looks like we're pretty much out of time, but I just want to ask each one of our panelists to say a final thought before we leave. And just, I also want to give you a lot of appreciation and credit, Randy and Julia, for sharing.
Thank you.
Thanks, Susan.
So Dror had to leave. It's 4:30 a.m. in Israel. So he left, which is understandable. So Claudia, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, I would like to thank you, Susan, for the invitation to participate, and as well to all the people attending the call. It was great to see the other companies and your technologies, and we are always open to opportunities to collaborate. And as well on this side of the Atlantic, on this side of the Atlantic, happy to help with any potential connections or any way I can help with. So thank you very much.
Wonderful. That's huge. So John, would you like to say a few words?
Oh, I'm just amazed at how far technology has come in my lifetime, and all the amazing electronic and digital technology we have is just truly amazing, and exceptionally useful. So it's great to see people taking it and moving forward with it. And we've got to remember that every now and then we do need to go back and everything doesn't fit on a nice computer screen or an 11.5 by 8 sheet of paper. We have to go back and remind ourselves where these images are coming from and ground truth things. But boy, carry on with the digital technologies and the digital studies and the digital research. Carry on.
Thank you. So Jeshurun and Ananya, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, I just feel like I had a lot of fun today, but I also learned so much. So thanks to everybody who presented, and thank you so much, Susan, for putting this together.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ananya.
Likewise, Susan, and all the speakers. I enjoyed your talk a lot, Claudia.
Yeah.
Good.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, everyone. And I'd like to let all of our attendees know that you'll be receiving an email as soon as I get the video processed, and it will have the show notes. And also I'd like to encourage you to be in touch with our panelists and be in touch with me. And also finally, Larry Davis, would you like to say a few words? But as our
I just applaud all of the presenters. Very good tonight. And now let's go to dinner.
I'm feeling hungry too. Great. Well, thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.